No one ever imagined a decorated Navy SEAL sniper would stand in handcuffs, humiliated in open court. But what kind of betrayal could push a national hero to this breaking point? Stay until the end and subscribe. You won't believe who really walked in that day. Lieutenant Commander Maya Fields had faced enemies in the dead of night, oceans away from home. Yet nothing made her palms sweat like standing here, shackled before strangers who only saw a headline. SEAL sniper accused of treason. Her uniform, the same crisp whites she'd worn for ceremonial honors, now felt like a costume stretched over a prisoner's chains. Flanked by two marshals, Maya stared ahead, unblinking, refusing to meet the eyes of the reporters packed into the gallery like vultures scenting fresh blood. The prosecutor's voice droned on. Unauthorized leaks, compromised operations, classified intelligence, words that twisted into barbs, designed to bury her beneath a mountain of public shame. They didn't know. None of them knew what really happened off that Somali coast, or how she'd chosen to risk everything to save the men who called her boss. In the last row, a young petty officer, barely 20, clenched his cover in his lap so tightly his knuckles turned white. He knew, but he couldn't speak. Not here, not yet. Maya's mother sat alone, straight-backed, a single tear tracing her cheek before she wiped it away, with the same discipline she'd drilled into her daughter. "Hold your head high," she'd always said. "They can break your body, but never your spirit." But that spirit felt brittle now. The defense attorney had done what he could, a worn ex-JAG with too many cases, too few victories, and a debt-riddled office that smelled of stale coffee and hopelessness. He leaned over, whispering, "I'll try for a deal. You'll still serve, maybe minimum security." But Maya barely heard him. She stared at the door instead. She had made peace with prison, but she hadn't made peace with the truth dying with her. The judge called for a recess. The gavel fell. Chains rattled as the marshals moved her back toward holding. Then, the heavy oak doors swung open. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the bailiff's routine commands caught in his throat. There he stood, Admiral Thomas Harland, the ghost of every SEAL's whispered legend. A man rumored to have toppled warlords with a nod, to have made presidents lean forward when he cleared his throat. He hadn't been seen in uniform in 3 years. He'd quietly retired after losing his own son on a botched extraction mission. Some said he blamed Maya. Others said he'd vanished to grieve. Yet here he was, in full dress blues, his chest a field of ribbons and medals that gleamed like defiance under the harsh fluorescent lights. His eyes locked onto Maya, and in that instant, her knees nearly buckled. No one knew they'd spoken only once since that mission. No one knew she'd stood in a muddy field halfway across the world, holding his son's dog tags, whispering an oath she never thought she'd have to keep. The Admiral's polished shoes echoed across the courtroom tile. The prosecutor rose, sputtering about, unauthorized entry, but fell silent when Harlan fixed him with a look colder than any battlefield wind. He stopped in front of Maya. For a heartbeat, the room held its breath. "Remove those cuffs," he said quietly. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The marshal hesitated, glanced at the judge, who simply gave a stiff nod. The chains fell away, clattering onto the floor like dead snakes. Admiral Harlan turned to the courtroom. "I have evidence," he said. "Evidence that clears Lieutenant Commander Fields of every charge you so eagerly threw at her. And I want it read into the record, now." Maya felt her throat close. She wanted to protest, to tell him not to destroy his own career for her. But when she met his eyes, she saw what he'd carried these years. Grief, guilt, but above all, a promise to the truth. The judge, a stern man who'd spent years seeing power bend the law in all the wrong ways, leaned forward. "Admiral Harland, you realize this proceeding is classified. Anything you say may—" The Admiral raised one weathered hand. "Save it, Your Honor." Classified or not, this woman saved 15 men who'd been sold out by their own handlers. She broke orders because the orders were wrong. I have the names, I have the files, and if you try to seal this, I'll read it to every camera out there. A hush fell. The petty officer in the back let out a breath that trembled through his whole body. Maya closed her eyes, fighting tears that threatened to ruin her steely calm. The same calm she'd trained for when storms raged and bullets screamed past. The next hours blurred. Gasps from the gallery as the Admiral laid bare secrets meant to stay buried. Government operatives selling intelligence to the highest bidder. Corrupt contractors who'd pocketed millions while Maya's team bled in the desert. And finally, the single comm he'd found, her encrypted message sent that night. Requesting immediate extraction for wounded. I accept full responsibility. By the time the gavel fell again, Maya's hands were free, but her knees gave out all the same. Harlan caught her elbow before she hit the floor, steady as he'd been the day she'd first pinned her trident on under his watchful eye. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed, shouting her name. Maya shielded her eyes from the flashbulbs, but the Admiral stepped in front of her, one broad shoulder blocking the worst of it. "You don't owe them anything," he murmured. "You gave them enough." She wanted to answer, to thank him, but no words came. Instead, she looked past the cameras, past the headlines already being written. She thought of the quiet letter she'd sent tonight to her fallen teammate's mother, telling her that her son hadn't died for nothing, telling her that Maya Fields had kept her promise. And when the Admiral guided her down the courthouse steps, heads turned, not in mockery, not in pity, but in silent respect. For a woman who had once waited alone in a dark kill zone for a helicopter that almost didn't come, and who now walked free, her chains traded for something far heavier. The truth, finally spoken. And this time, no one could take it back. Outside the courthouse, the summer air felt too bright, too loud, like the world had forgotten she'd just been moments away from disappearing behind barbed wire and concrete walls. Reporters swarmed closer, microphones thrust forward, each one hungry for a piece of the woman they'd just spent months tearing down. Maya lifted her chin, but Harlan's voice rumbled at her side. "Not today, Commander. I'll handle this." He faced the press, his broad shoulders casting a shadow over the steps where Maya stood, still half in disbelief. "You want a statement?" he barked. "Here it is. This officer upheld her oath when others betrayed theirs. If you're looking for someone to blame, turn those cameras on the men hiding behind closed doors in D.C. A few reporters lowered their mics. Others shouted follow-up questions. Did she really leak intel? Was she a hero or a criminal? Would there be charges against the real traitors? But none of it reached her fully. Maya's gaze drifted over the heads of the crowd, locking on to the young petty officer from the back row. He hovered by the edge of the steps, looking like he might vanish into the city if she didn't anchor him to this moment. She stepped down, closing the distance. He straightened, heels clicking together in a salute that was too rigid, too raw to be for show. She returned it, her hand trembling just once before steadying. "Thank you for coming, Jacobs," she said quietly. He opened his mouth to speak, but couldn't find the words. He didn't need to. She clapped a hand on his shoulder, a silent promise that what he'd witnessed would not be buried with sealed files and half-truths. Behind them, the Admiral kept talking, not the polished spin of a Pentagon press conference, but the blunt force of a man too old to care about who got uncomfortable. He named names, laid out just enough to guarantee that the next news cycle wouldn't move on before the rot was exposed. When it was over, Harlan turned to her, exhaustion flickering behind his steel-blue eyes. "I'll take the heat for this," he murmured. "I was always going to." Maya shook her head. "We both did what we had to do, sir. Same as always." He almost smiled. Almost. Then he gave a single clipped nod and stepped aside, letting her face the last of the questions alone. But when the reporters pressed forward again, they found no sensational headline, no scandalous soundbite. Instead, Maya Fields lifted her voice just loud enough to be heard over the chaos. Heroes don't look like the stories you write. They look like sailors in overworked ops rooms, like mothers waiting up all night, like men who stand up when the easy thing is to sit down. If you want my story, tell their story. That's all I have to say. She turned her back on the shouting crowd, walking down the courthouse steps as a free woman, her past still heavy on her shoulders, but her oath finally honored in daylight. And for the first time in months, Maya Fields allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't fought alone after all.